I don't know. I haven't heard. I don't think I've ever met another person with that last name.
Shadzi. Not like only effing Shadzi is the password to the bank
Well,
account.
That's a good one. I should use that.
Talked about kind of getting started with Audi Club
Yeah.
and doing events. Where did you start in this? Like beyond that, those events, like how did you get into the space?
Yeah.
Or how did you get your car enthusiast going?
So I was real when I was younger, like early on in high school, I was really into car audio, which kind of got me into cars. And I got kind of bored with car audio because you can only put like so many subwoofers in a car and shake it apart. And so I was starting to get interested in cars. And I moved to California my senior year of high school, and one of my dad's childhood friends owned a wrecking yard out here for Audi and Volkswagen. He would buy wrecked Audi and Volkswagens and part them out. It's called A German Auto Wrecking. And so my dad promised me that he'd buy me a car if I moved with the family to California, because I really didn't want to. It was my senior year of high school. And so he said, I have a childhood friend who can get us a good deal on a car. So we went down to A German, and I didn't know what Audis were. I'd never heard of. I was from Nebraska, so for me it was like Nissan, those lowered Nissan pickups with the and like a Honda CRX. That was the kind of stuff that I was into. And so he pulls out this Coupe GT. It was probably like an 85 or something. And I was just like, this just looks weird, And we were on the block in it. I just didn't get it. And but they also showed me an Audi 4000 Quattro that they had for sale. It was an 84, and I was like, that's 4-wheel drive. That's so cool, So like I could drive that in the snow, and I was just in high school, but I just thought that, like, I didn't know that was possible. I didn't know you could get a 4-wheel drive car, and I always like thought it would be cool to have a 4-wheel drive truck, but I didn't want to drive a truck around, So that kind of stuck with me, and then so I ended up getting a CRX, and that lasted for about 6 months, and then I actually made friends with his son, and we became really close friends. And so he really started kind of getting me into the Audi universe, and I just like interesting things that are different, and there was so much to learn and know about Audi. And so I went to junior college, and my freshman year at this junior college, I took this like auto shop class, and I don't know why, but the instructor showed us that ESPN piece, Unfair Advantage. I think it was called Unfair Advantage, right? And there's like, I think I told you this at dinner, like there's my life before that, and there's my life after that. And when I saw what Audi was able to do with the Quattro that I had noticed and thought was novel and interesting, and then the way they went into these series, dominated with this technology, and to the point that they did it so well, they got banned from it. And then they went to the next one and the next one. And the sounds these cars made. And so I was just like, and so I actually I bought that Audi 4000 Quattro, that 84 that they had. And so I just thought, like, there's similar DNA here. I want to make my car into that. I want to connect with what Audi did. I just want to see and touch one of those cars if I could. But so this was like probably like in 95 range or whatever, 94, 95. And so I just kind of became obsessed with modifying my Audi and making it more like an Audi race car. But there was just nothing. There was zero. And after a few years, this company, which everyone's familiar with, 2 Bennett, I actually ran into them at Thunderhill Racetrack. And when I saw them, I was just like, oh my God, someone is doing all the things that I've been dreaming about doing that I didn't think I wasn't even sure if they were possible. Like I used to go to the junkyard and see an Audi 5000 turbo engine. And I'm like, why, could I put that in my car? I didn't even know where to start. I just had no. And I actually, initially, I thought that the intake manifold, which said turbo on it, I thought that was the turbocharger. So I spent a bunch of time trying to figure out how to put the intake manifold I just didn't know anything. I was a complete novice.
Yeah.
And so I ended up graduating, college in, 96, 798 or whatever. And I was just in full on obsession mode over everything to do with Audi racing. I got involved with one of the two Bennett friends, and his name was Tim Valencia. So he built a 4000 Quattro race car, and he was racing it in a NASA racing series. And so I would go every weekend to his house and help him build and modify the car. And then I go to the track, and I was part of his pit crew and stuff. And so I was just fully obsessed with it. So when I graduated, I basically came out of college with my marketing business degree, and I was just like, I want to work in the Volkswagen Audi aftermarket. So I ended up getting a job at Eurospec Sport, what was actually Overland Parts at the time. And part of my role there is I actually helped create the Eurospec Sport brand. That
Interesting.
was their line of performance products. That was me and one other guy that we launched that. But then I ended up going to work for another shop in town called New Dimensions. That it's long since out of business, but they were one of the bigger, more well-known Volkswagen tuners in the 90s. And so I bounced around at some of these aftermarket opportunities, and I learned a lot about what not to do in business. And then I went and dabbled a little bit with some Silicon Valley startup stuff, and then I ended up at a startup for about 4 years. But the time that I was at the startup, I was really starting to build what eventually became 034 Motorsport. And there was a product when I was at Eurospec that I proposed as one of the products that I really wanted to launch when I was there, and the owner just thought nobody would want it, and it was a dumb idea or whatever. And so I actually ended up leaving there, but I kept working on that product with this engineer who had contacted me about it, and so we continued to develop and build it. And that was the first product. It was called 034 EFI. It was a standalone ECU that could run fuel injection on a 5-cylinder. There was really nothing on the market at that time other than like a Motec, which was like $10,000 back then.
Right.
And so this was like $800, and you can rip all the wiring off your engine, get rid of all the CIS crap, and you can install a fuel rail, connect 40 or 50 wires, install some sensors, and you can like program your car on a laptop. So it was pretty revolutionary, and that's what launched 034. And I started selling those in like 2003. And then for about 2 years, I worked full time and did that on the side. And so I literally slept like 4 hours a day for like 2 years.
Yeah.
And people, when people talk about, they work really hard early in their career to do things, I literally I worked 2 full-time jobs, well, plus, and then just slept like 4 hours. And so in 2005, I was able to quit my job, the job at the startup that I was at, and I went full time with 034 Motorsport. And the rest is kind of history. It grew really rapidly, and initially it was the killer app was the 034 EFI ECU, and then there was a whole product line surrounding the installation of that product, and so certain brackets and sensors and everything to make it fit. We ended up adapting it to the newly released 180, because for like 5 years no one could tune 180s, and so we were selling full standalone ECUs to convert A4s and S4s to our ECU. And so the fastest 180s and 2.7Ts in the world for quite a few years were on 034 EFI. And then finally, kind of by the mid 2005 era, ECU tuning finally caught up with things. And so at that point, we started transitioning away from the standalone product in kind of like 2010, 2011. By 2014, we discontinued it completely. We no longer support it, and we're much more the company you see now, which is kind of a classic tuning industry model with ECU software, ECU flashing software, and a really nice product line of suspension, braking, and performance parts.
Right.
But for me, it was I'm lucky because I got to I got to do, there's a cliche, I got to do what I love, and the company is very much the company is very much a representation of who I am at the time. So when I first started it was just manic and fast and furious, and a lot of DIY stuff, and nothing was finished. And you had to do everything. You had to finish everything yourself as the customer.
Right.
And then and I was 30. I loved racing. It was about going fast, and it was more of a lifestyle business for me. I was using the business as a vehicle to have different experiences in life, and so I had to start getting more serious into my 40s. Like, do I probably should start thinking about retiring someday and having a retirement savings, and kids are going to go to college at some point. And so the business has always kind of reflects where I've been, and it's been a great experience. It's been incredible.
It's funny how that works. It sounds too like, not to compare, because who knows where the hell we all were, but like, you look at those times of like, I look at us at Vortex, or I know when I talk to Scotto about Hoonigan, like you get through that time where, like, if the hustle has to be strong to, it's working around the clock. Then you have kids too, and it's like, wow. Like, I remember for us at Vortex, my Jamie Vondruska, who was my partner there, like when he had his first child a couple years before I had my first, and like watching the difference, like when the kids hit the scenario, and you're like, oh.
It changes everything.
Yeah.
Well, I had my first kid in 2007, and I was working like 7 days a week around the clock. And so when, before my son Garrett was born, I just was like, I can't do that. So I made a commitment to not work weekends. And that was my big thing. And then I had to hire more people, and it had a huge impact on the business. And I had to grow the business and cut costs, and just so that I could have weekends off. So that I could see this kid that I just created. So it does. And I think that's the interesting thing about small businesses, right? Is it very much, for good or bad, reflects all the people who are in the business, especially the leadership, from the top down.
Right.
You have a big impact. So the more I've been able to improve myself and work on myself, and hold myself accountable and grow emotionally and in other ways, the business has been able to follow suit. But I've always kind of been the limit for what could make the business better. It really was me that was limiting it all along. So.
Interesting. Yeah, no, it's funny how reflective it can be in that regard.
Yeah, well, and you have to, otherwise you just keep. If you want to stop making the same mistakes over and over again, you have to reflect and see, like, what. Why are we beating our head against this wall constantly? But you see so many small businesses, that's how they operate, for years and years. So. But yeah, no, it's I'm incredibly fortunate, and I would say if anyone wants to follow suit, it's not an easy road by any means. Starting and running your own business is brutal, from a money and finances standpoint. I've fired 20 people in one day. Laid 20 people off in one day because I knew I wouldn't be able to make payroll, during hard times and recessions and mistakes that were made and whatever. So if you can't make like really hard decisions like that, and you can't survive, and no matter what, you just never quit. And again, I think anyone who's, like you mentioned, Brian, and I'm sure you know what it's like too in the positions that you've been in. You have to be able to just overcome every hurdle and just never stop. Right. And that's not for everybody. I think a lot of people would just be like, no, I call it quits. It's too much.
Yeah. Well, it's almost a twofold thing, right? I think what you're speaking to there is really any successful small business that requires growth, right? Like
100%.
You need to do that. But then on top of that, you have this extra level or layer of you're working within your passion. And so that's kind of like, on one hand, that's great because it makes every day entertaining and stimulating in some way in that regard. But on the other hand, you can dull or ruin your passion if it makes you miserable. The business does, the pressure from that does. And on top of that, I find like we always wrestled with when you start, everybody I'm sure would love to work within, if you don't, depending on, there are plenty of people who want to work within their passion. So they might look at a company like 034, might look at Audi Club or Vortex or Hoonigan or any of these, right, and be like, oh, that would be the perfect job. I want to do that. But the other challenge we always had at Vortex was like more, everybody says they want to do it, but like the idea of like what your passion means to you and what working within your passion means to you, it doesn't just mean that you're driving cool cars every day, right?
No.
Like and like, so you have to like just be able to distill down to like the people who just want to do it because they want to drive cool cars every day, or the people who are like, yeah, I get it, and I've got the killer instinct and the work ethic, and that's
you're 100% right. I mean, this is a business just like any other business,
right?
It's really not. If you look at this business on paper next to a company that sells, pork bellies, it's really not different. In fact, you may not be able to tell the difference between a company like 034 Motorsport and a company that sells commodities. But the passion for what you're doing is what drives you to get through the hard times, to do new innovative things,
Right.
To do things bigger and better, to compete viciously, with the competition. But you're right. Your ability the extra energy you get from your passion comes at the expense of it being your passion in your personal life.
Yeah.
And that is 100% true. Like for me, I actually wouldn't even say I'm a car guy anymore. I love biking and fishing and cooking and woodworking and speaker building. Those are kind of the things I do. And I have zero desire. Like if I built my dream house right now, it would not have a lift. It would not have an auto shop in it. I can come here every day,
right?
And we have all that. And I have wonderful engineers and mechanics that can work on my car for me, so I don't have to bang up my knuckles and do all that. And I've done that for years. So for me, my passion has really become building and running a successful business that treats people well, that offers people, career opportunities, career advancement, that sets a standard in the industry for customer service or product quality, or how we conduct ourselves, or all those things. Marketing ourselves in a unique and different way that other companies don't. Those are the things that excite me now. Not to say I'm not passionate about creating amazing performance products for cars.
Right.
I'm finding fulfillment and passion in other things, and at the end of the day, we have to run a great business, just like you would if you were running an insurance, company.
I think that's I'd be curious your thought on kind of where you were as you're starting on 34, because like for us when we were starting Vortex, I worked for a family business, and my dad was very supportive of me kind of engaging my passion through business as well. So like he was helpful in letting me do both, right, and making it possible for me to do both. So like I was very like, as we were forming, the other guys went full time before I did because I had the flexibility to not do that. But like it was living in both those worlds, doing both things at the same time. I was literally like a sales rep for like tools, right? For like, which was it was a dying business because Home Depot and Lowe's and all these companies are coming that are going to like kill the segment, and there's not going to be a lot of money in it if you're not one of those players. So like seeing the way the tea leaves were going, it made sense to be looking at an alternate exit anyway. But I went through this brief period of like, I'd be, at the Geneva Motor Show covering a new, launches of, whether it's this new Audi concept or like Bugattis or, whatever. But then coming home and doing like a trade show selling shovels. Right. And so it was like, trying to live in both worlds. I definitely saw the value of the passion stuff because it makes it a little bit easier to get up every day and do it and be excited about it.
Yeah. No matter what I do in my life, I do have to be passionate about it. So for me, I'm still passionate about it.
Right.
But I'm not spending any time in my personal life doing car stuff because I do it for my job. Right. I get my fill on it.
Right.
And it would be kind of almost neurotic for me to do car stuff in my personal life as well as my job.
That's the thing, right? Like we just got back from Monterey, or like I'm sure you and I have both done events, or probably a lot of our careers. Like I wrestled that with like next year we had, when Audi was going back to Le Mans, like they're of course they pulled the plug on that program and they're going to Formula One now. So like, but there was this plan to go over there, and now the debate is, because we already had some things booked, like, do I just go and be a fan? Like I don't know how to do it, right? Like I and it's not like I don't mean that in some dopey way, like look at me, first world problems, I might go to Le Mans, like it's more let me put it a different way. When we sold Vortex, the first couple months that I didn't have anything to do and had no purpose, I was stressed out. Like I didn't know how to just go do whatever. And
I can
like,
see that.
yeah, it was probably where I lost the most hair, you know, like slept the least, whatever. And like, it should be a great time of life and it's completely stressful. And and I kind of feel the same of like, if I go to a race and I don't have to do something there, like cover it or meet with people or like something, shoot photography, whatever, like it almost seems like, why am I doing this? Right? I should be home with my kids. I should be doing, you know, something else. So I actually at this point like throwing purpose into an overindulgence, because in my head I can kind of justify the overindulgence because it's work. Right. Does that make sense?
100%. I think, you know, the vast majority of all people that go to events like that are just there to spectate and observe. So the fact that you have a desire to have a purpose makes you well suited to be in the industry.
I suppose.
And to miss out on the fun racing stuff on the track while you're in a meeting doing something else, you know? So it's so at the end of the day, it's just, you know, it's the outcome of the work we do that matters. And you know, that's kind of what counts.
All right, so I'm curious about you're at Eurospec and you're working around some like their collection that they had at the time.
Well, that's why I went to work there, right? And I basically I think I basically sent a resume and a cover letter there, and I was like, I'm not taking no for an answer.
Right.
So the owner was like, well, I really don't want to hire anyone now, but you know, if you want to work, you know, for $10 an hour, I can find some stuff for you to do. And I literally graduated with a college degree, and I'm like, Dad, guess what? I just got a job for $10 an hour, you know, and which was probably more money in 1998 than it is now, but it was a lot less than I should have been making, but I didn't care. You know, I was early in my 20s, and I just knew I wanted to be there. And then I ended up getting to work with and interact a lot with the Audi race cars that he had. So he had a legit Trans Am Audi. I think it was. I forget.
Isn't that the one Zach Brown has now?
Yeah, it was sold a few years ago.
I think it was sold to Alan McNish's PR guy, Martin Pass, also worked with United Motorsports, which is also Zach Brown, who's, you know, runs McLaren F1, right? So when that car sold, at least, I don't know where the others ended up, but when that car sold, it went back to, I know Martin, and he was kind of keeping me up to date. They restored it, and I think he brought it back and did a couple years ago. They did Monterey Historics, you know, at Rolex. So
Steve, the ex, you know, Steve Slotkin passed away, I don't know, probably 6-7 years ago. But he bought these cars, and he would take them to the track. And so,
how cool is that? So he'd run them.
He would actually run them at Laguna Seca. And so inevitably it was like, hey, I'm taking the car out this weekend. You know, can you take a look at this hose or whatever? You know. So I got to start working on these cars, and he had with the car when I don't know the exact history when he bought it, but it came with a load of spares. And so there was all these clip locks. So I ended up going through all the clip locks, and you know, clip lock is a 4x4 by 2 foot cardboard plywood box. And I went through and inventoried all the spare parts. There was all kinds of cool stuff in there. I still have pictures of a lot of it. And then eventually, you know, we would, you know, restored the car, we pulled the motor out and rebuilt it. And, you know, the turbo would have issues, and so, but we kept the car very original. And then he also had another car, which was a converted IMSA GTO, and that was the car that I just, you know, both cars were cool, but that car was the ultimate. And so that's, if you've ever seen it, it's the Rothmans C4 S4. Yeah. So Audi did basically, you know, destroyed all those cars, but a few were sold and repurposed into different body types. And so someone in South Africa got a hold of one of the ex IMSA GTO cars and rebodied it as a C4 S4. And it was Rothman's livery all over it. It's like a blue car. But that was legit IMSA GTO underneath. And so then I got involved with that car too.
Correct me if I'm wrong, because you've probably been around that car enough that you know way more intimately. But from what I understand, the Trans Am, the 200, was kind of based on a road chassis, body and white. They build up from there,
100%,
right?
yeah.
And the 90 IMSA GTO was kind of a tube frame bonkers. Like
It was,
they
yeah.
look similar sitting next to each other, but
Yeah.
but much more
No,
developed.
the 200, was built by a private, race car builder in the what was his name? I think he was out of Florida, but basically Audi.
Oh, Group 44, like
yeah. What was his name?
I think they were out of Alexandria, Virginia. If we're talking about the team, they worked with like Curly Haywood was involved in that program, and like
they basically got a body in white, Audi 200, and and that's what it looks like. So it looks like a race car, like a shop like 034 Motorsport would build.
Right.
The IMSA GTO is a space tube frame, and it's a whole different level. It looks like it's it belongs in some kind of Le Mans racing series.
Well, I mean, it was in the GTO class in IMSA at the time,
right.
and the other thing Hurley told me, I interviewed him years ago. Maybe I should reach out to him and see if I can run that interview as a podcast.
Yeah.
But one of the things he told me in that was more those cars were they didn't think they'd do 12 or 24 hours, so they didn't do Daytona or Sebring, but otherwise they ran the whole season and won in a season, right? Like I believe they got the championship that first season, and that was it. But yeah, they were
really cool car, and the IMSA is a whole nother level of fabrication quality.
Yeah,
but the 200 was cool because it's just like it's like something that nowadays anyone could build, although there's still a lot of trick stuff in it. All the uprights were magnesium, and the motor was all magnesium and really trick. So yeah, there was those were really cool. So I got to interact closely with those cars, which was amazing. And then
didn't he also have? I thought he had like a DTM car.
He did. He had a DTM V8 as well, which was more nicely developed than the 200. It had kind of like, it was still a body and white car. But it had more of the parts and fabrication from the IMSA GTO, because they were similar era cars.
Right.
And I think Audi was directly involved in that.
Yeah.
I'm totally blanking on the guy's name in the US, but there was a privateer in the US that built the first Trans Am car. And
well, it
was nicely done, but it was not an Audi effort.
Oh, wasn't it? Like
they were involved with it. I mean, Audi paid this shop to build the car, but it wasn't. The IMSA GTO was built and designed at Audi in Germany.
They were also in the US, because this was probably like a Joe Hoppen thing. Is my guess.
Joe Hoppen, that's what I'm thinking of.
Well, yeah. Joe was head of motorsport for Porsche North America, Audi North America, Volkswagen. So like, Joe, I know again from Hurley, and I think I know the guy who bought these cars. He tried to buy a Trans Am, but it was too expensive at the time. But I think when he was convincing Hurley, they ran some 200s at like Petit Le Mans, is what Hurley said, but like they were not the Trans Am car. They were like just tuned 200s. And then so Hoppen was Audi of America, right? Effectively at the time. So like, I don't know. Unfortunately, he's not around anymore. That's a really fascinating time in like, whether it's like Buffum getting the Group 4 car, and then some Sport Quattro, some Group B Sport Quattros. That's all Hoppen, and like those cars. Right. I think both these programs, Trans Am and IMSA, are kind of like Audi going, what do we do now after rally? And Hoppen going, I got some stuff. All right.
Yeah, and they took what they learned in rally and they applied it to road racing, which, to their credit, they completely revolutionized rally racing, and then they brought that same technology to road racing. And that was what was always so inspiring to me, is that how does someone bring that level of innovation and outside of the box thinking to a series where so many people are just doing the same thing over and over again. So that was really cool and inspiring to me, just to see you know, how Audi did that, and then did it like 2, 3, 4 times in a row. I wish we still saw that same type of innovation from them. In some ways, they've done it with diesel and electrification and things like that. But
I wonder, I'm curious how the F1 thing plays out, because
yeah,
they're not, you know, the manufacturers in F1 aren't messing around, and you have some serious, you know, whether it's, you look at like what Audi, look at the way they go from like rally on, is they go in and they change with technology, right? So they push the technology edge, bringing all-wheel drive into rally, and they dominate for a couple seasons, right? But then by the time you get to like Group B, the Sport Quattro and the E2 are like, they're fast, but at that point, mid-engine is kind of passing them, right? Like you had to be mid, and they were starting to test mid-engine, honestly, with that, like
they did, yeah. There was a prototype,
right? Yeah, there's like East Germany, Walter Rural, that boxy thing, and then of course the Group was a Group S, the concept that the Audi tradition has now, but which is the only remaining one that never made it. Group B ends, but like then they go to Pikes Peak, where like again those cars were kind of resetting the norm or the schema at Pikes Peak, and even Unser knew, you know, I'm not going to set the record without them, right? Like that, like I need to enter in one of those to do it, and he does in '86. But like, but then they go same thing. They jump into different sections of racing to kind of like push the envelope. So you know, Trans Am, IMSA, even DTM with the all-wheel drive, but like, and then they do it again in Le Mans with like the whether it's the fast rebuilds on the R8s, because even towards the end of R8, they're not that fast compared to their competition, or like the TDI. I guess that's what, like, I'm almost more interested by Dakar right now than I am by Formula One, or the connotation of it, or even had they gone ahead with an HPDI, because like going into Le Mans with the IMSA, it's such a spec affordable formula. It's not like the science fair that was LMP1, right? So like the R18s were very much of a science fair kind of project, where these are, you choose the engine, but otherwise it's, you know, spec hybrid system, spec battery. It's not really like the hypercars. So like to me, the science fair has moved on to the car. That car is such an experiment spaceship, right? Like it's almost in the spirit of what Audi Sport has done throughout their, you know, from the 80s on, where they've been dominant. It's pushing the technology.
I'll have to check. I haven't really read too much about the Dakar stuff, so I'll check that out.
Dakar is, what's even more fascinating about that program, and we'll see, because they're about to, I think they're launching their second evolution of it for this year's series. There is a series around it too. There's like a rally raid series that FIA has done. So like Dakar is the main one, kind of like Le Mans is to FIA WEC. Okay. But like the car is I don't want to undersell it. It's almost like a hodgepodge of what they'd invested in, right? So the range extender is the DTM engine. The energy converter from the engine, the range extender, and the electric motors are the drive units that they developed for Formula E, right? So they've got all this sunk cost in this amazing racing
hardware. They're getting to repurpose a lot of that.
Right. Yeah. And they went, if they hadn't had the suspension failures that they had, because it's a heavy vehicle, but if they haven't had the suspension failures that they experienced at Dakar, they'd have probably won it. They were very dominant, right? And that's what kind of a lot of people were saying after Dakar was like, once they figure that out, right, it's not going to be fun anymore, because that's, for whatever that opinion is worth, that's what Audi does, right? They look at the rule book and go, how can we engineer technology around this and dominate? And that's when they're at their best. So like,
that's really, I don't know how they
do. Right. Yeah, it's fantastic to watch. And it's funny too, like going from like a Formula One race or a Formula E race, which is like a couple hours, to like Le Mans. You look at, you know, if you're used to Le Mans, you go watch a Formula One or Formula E race, you're like, what's the point? It's over in like 2 hours.
Right.
But then you look at Dakar and it's like a month long, right? Like from start to finish, you're talking about weeks. So like, you know, it's fascinating for that too, because you can follow along day by day. It must be grueling to cover on site. Like, I don't know how you just drop out of real life, unless you're with a team. I don't know how you drop out of real life for like that many weeks in the middle of nowhere.
That's crazy.
But but it's I love the science fair nature of it. To me, Audi and engineering in racing has always been when they're the most interesting. And so Dakar to me is the program.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, I also really love the the Champion Motorsport era for Audi, and that's when they worked closely with the privateer as well.
Well, and that's if there's a downside of that Le Mans program being shelved, it's that it was approachable like the R8s were.
Yeah,
right? Like
I think
you could afford to do it.
That's what really benefits the tuning industry, and that kind of when people can see Audi models racing, and that's inspiring. So when someone can say, I've got an RS6, just like they have an RS6.
Yeah. All right. So when you say Champion,
I was referring to like one. Yeah. Oh, well, that was great too. All the Champion racing, but I was specifically referring to like the Champion S4 and the RS6.
Right. Yeah.
Randy Post and Michael.
Totally.
Michael Galati and all that era of racing.
Or like before that, like the touring car, right? Like the BTCC.
Yeah. And then touring car, very exciting. Yeah. That's just touring car racing is just so exciting, anyways.
That formula was so magical because unlike the kind of silhouette cars that DTM became after that, like these were, and kind of similar, you had like the all-wheel drive Audis against the rear-wheel drive manual transmission BMWs against the front-wheel drive Ford Mondeos or whatever else. And like it was bring your best and let's see how it goes, and they looked like the car you would drive to work on Monday.
Yeah, totally. And just balls to the wall racing, just like, how are these cars getting around these corners? It's insane.
Yeah, totally.
But that's really exciting. I'd love to see more Audi racing like that, just for the sake of the enthusiast market.
So here's the magic. We can be two old men just complaining about how things changed, but like the magic in racing, right, is for the fan. That's, or at least fans like us, like that's what's magical about it. But I think the challenge from like a safety perspective or a performance perspective in racing is, other than like GT3 racing, it's moved so far beyond that, right? Like DTM was full on silhouette, nothing remotely other than like the shape of the bodywork on that chassis.
Yeah, no, those are like mid-engine V8s and all this stuff.
Right.
But it's still a port, right? Even NASCARs have graphics that make them look like a Ford Taurus or whatever it is.
But do people really think?
I think it does. Oh, does it? I think absolutely. I think I don't think they would do it if it didn't matter, right? I mean, if there could just be a bunch of nondescript, whatever shaped cars with a bunch of advertising on it, but the manufacturers are specifically looking to reinforce their brand and the models in their brand, right? So they benefit a lot from emulating the look and the concept that this is still a Ford Mustang, even though there's zero anything to do with it.
Right.
I don't know if Ford is racing a Mustang NASCAR.
I think they are.
Yeah. I don't know anything about NASCAR other than just a high level concept.
And Toyota rear wheel drive Camry. Yeah,
exactly.
It's to me, NASCAR. I mean, I doubt many people will listen to this podcast and care what I think about NASCAR, but like to me, NASCAR is more like it's a lifestyle thing, right? Like it's entertainment, but it's not. I'm sure it's a real sport. I don't mean that, but it's such a marketing machine.
No, you're right. It's eclipsed. It's eclipsed auto racing.
Yeah.
It's more than auto racing. It's
right.
It is a lifestyle. I mean, if you've ever been to a NASCAR race, I haven't. Say more than that.
All right. No, I haven't.
Go sometime.
Yeah.
We don't get a lot of NASCAR out here, but I don't know when the last time NASCAR was at Sears Point, but there's Sears Point every day of the year, and then there's Sears Point when NASCAR's there, and it's a completely different.
Is it? I think when Matthias Ekstrom was like Red Bull sponsored, weren't they were running a Toyota team, and I think he ran that track, right?
Yeah, I believe it's one of the stops on it's the road. It's one of the road.
Yeah, it was. And they're going to do Chicago, which is weird. But
I don't know what COVID, what's been disrupted. But.
That's the other side of it, though, right? Like looking at the car, like I think some people are looking at Formula E, like NASCAR and Formula One, are looking at Formula E and seeing these like city center races and the attendance they pull.
Mm-hmm.
And man, we got to go to city centers, but I don't know how you do that with like a rally raid car.
They're fun. We for a few years in San Jose we had Indy, and I mean it's just crazy just seeing an Indy car doing, 190 down First Street in San Jose,
Yeah.
Really cool. But I know they stopped doing it for some reason.
But I mean, the science of, or rather the attraction of it, right? Like even if you look at like have you ever heard of or gone to the Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix?
No, I have not.
So it's kind of like it's vintage racing, right? But it's concours around it on certain days, and they've got different events throughout the week. It's a little bit Monterey Car Week light, right? Like, but kind of similar. But one of the things, at least at the time, and it's been a number of years since I went, it was always conflict with Waterfest. But like, but they pull crowds. The numbers they pull are insane because it's in like Shenley Park, which is this park that's like kind of in the city. It's near like Pitt and Oakland and whatever, but it's very approachable to city dwellers and people in that metro area. So like, it's kind of hard to justify driving out to Sears Point if you live in San Francisco, because you're going to spend a fair amount of time doing it.
Yeah.
But now if it's in downtown San Francisco, the amount of people who just come in for the spectacle of it, is hard to deny. So
yeah, but it's very disruptive, and I know business, a lot of businesses would get kind of marooned on the inside of the race course, right. And I think there were businesses that were complaining about loss of I don't know all the details, but yeah, anyways, that's really cool racing. I like that. And it's very approachable. I think the more Audi races real sedan looking cars or real models, the more enthusiasm it drives and builds in the customer base.
I wish TCR had more of a foothold here. That RS3 LMS that they have.
Those are cool. I mean, those are really neat. And they do a certain amount of that.
Yeah,
it's just it's the bigger, Audi, just like with World Challenge, that Audi just got so much visibility,
Right. Well, and they were,
for some reason, whatever the case.
They were like, at the time within Audi's product range, they were the performance leader product within the range, right? Yeah. And so like, whereas like an RS3 LMS is more of it's an entry level race car from customer racing, right? And so it was more of a customer racing effort. Yeah. So is it as inspirational as the programs? I mean, not certainly the racers. It's much more approachable. If you want to get into racing affordably and have a really capable
for a
vehicle,
racer,
it's a great product. But to inspire enthusiasts, it's a little harder to get your head around. Plus, you're not getting the broadcast or media exposure either, because it's not top
media exposure. It's not on ESPN or whatever, and then you get like kind of some celebrity status driver that everyone's interested in.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, but the privateer Audi customer racing stuff is great too. I heard that they sold over 100 of those cars. Do you know what the numbers are on it?
On which? All of them?
On the RS3 LMS.
Boy, that's a good question. The other problem right now is I don't know that Audi Sport Customer Racing in the US is fully functional, like the distribution and whatever, right? So like, while the German programs, and their series are kind of like, the problem with the US in that regard too is the series are so spread out, where especially in Germany and Europe in general, there's less distance to cover. And gosh, their whole series like the LN that's entirely at the Nürburgring. But I think Unitronic just got theirs. The team that runs did they get another one? I mean, they've been sponsoring. They got the new one. Oh, they got the new one. Okay, got it. They just got the new one. Okay. I don't know. I think NGP hasn't yet, and I don't know how that changes from like Canada to. Yeah. Well, wait. I think Unitronic's team is US based anyway. But whatever. There are so few teams running it at this point. I don't know that like Audi Sport Customer Racing in the USA is supporting as much. There aren't any R8s, and when you, especially like IMSA, nobody's running the GT3. So while the latest evolution is running in Europe, I don't know that anybody is in the US. And without that support, it's not going to grow. I was shocked that they're doing any of it, any of that customer racing stuff. But maybe they're trying to emulate what Porsche's doing or something. It's interesting, right? Like Volkswagen Group. I mean, if you look at obviously Dieselgate changed things, but like
Mhm.
if you look at peak motorsport at Volkswagen Group, you've got like what WRC Polo championship winning. You have LMP1, Porsche, and Audi championship winning. I think Porsche won that year. Or Audi and Porsche were usually vying for it. You had at the GT3, or well, then you had GTLM, Porsche running 911s. And then at GT3, you had Lamborghini, Bentley, Audi. Who am I missing? Porsche at GT3, right? 4 programs. And then TCR, you had Seat. And I'm not even counting, like, I think there was a lesser rally program for Skoda maybe, but like you had Seat, Audi, Volkswagen, GTI in TCR, right?
Mhm.
So the amount of racing programs that Volkswagen was doing as a group
Yeah.
and developing, because it's not like, even you could look at the 2 LMP1s, they were not the same drivetrain, not even remotely. They didn't share anything.
Right.
So like,
Right.
and the challenge to that is, I think I remember at that time hearing they did a media exposure study, and like Mercedes, that was championship winning in Formula One at the time. This is pre-Netflix, Drive to Survive.
Mhm.
Like even then, Mercedes was getting more media exposure out of that one program
Mhm.
than Volkswagen Group was getting across everything that I just mentioned.
Wow.
So like that's the magic, right? When you're Volkswagen Group or Mercedes stroking the check, it's like, why are we doing this? And if media exposure is your litmus.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. No, I get it. I get the challenges there. I mean, even at 034 Motorsport, we dialed way back on those type of efforts, because while they're fun and exciting, the ROI just isn't there.
Yeah. What's a great way to make a small fortune in racing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Start with
Spend a big one.
Start with a big fortune.
Yeah. Start with the big one. Yeah. No, it's 100% true. So yeah, there's a lot of money being spent on that stuff, but it's just so expensive.
Yeah.
You're talking about $50,000 a weekend,
Yeah.
to run a car like that, and then trying to get the crew and the travel expenses, and it's a lot of money. So yeah, the chance that you can make money on doing that is pretty slim for most companies.
Yeah.
But if you find a rich guy who wants to go out and drive, and he's willing to pay you $50,000 a weekend, then you're kind of in business. So we did that for a number of years.
Well, you guys did that, what, the 25 hours of Thunderhill?
That's when we won the 25 hours overall, and in a TCR Audi TTRS. That well, no, it wasn't a TCR. It was
that Mark II, right?
What was the series before?
It was a VLN class.
VLN.
And that
it was
car,
the VLN.
That car was
VLN
developed.
class car. Yeah, and
right.
It was an Audi built car for VLN, and then the car was delivered here, and we basically outfitted it for endurance racing.
Was that car a 5-cylinder or 4-cylinder?
It was a stock, Mark II TTRS 5-cylinder.
Okay, but it was front wheel drive.
It was front wheel drive. Had like 300 series slicks on it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what the TCR RS3s are, front wheel drive, right? Like that's, I think they're 4 cylinders.
And they're fat. I mean,
yeah,
it was very controversial when we would post about it. Everyone would be like, "Oh man, it's front wheel drive," and our response was, Audi tested various configurations, and this was the fastest. I mean, I think the car was by far the fastest car we've ever been associated with on a race.
I think that's the point, right? Like, as much as I like Quattro and I like 5 cylinders and whatever else, but I'm sure all this was tested for maximum speed, maximum efficiency, like get around the track faster and win the race, right?
And it was. I mean, it easily won the 25 hours of Thunderhill against all kinds of rear-wheel drive cars.
Didn't it?
So yeah, and the key to winning the 25 hours of Thunderhill is just keeping your car on track, and running very fast laps for 25 hours. But yeah, so I mean, we did that, and we were working with a private individual, who's a high net worth person who had a dream of getting out and racing, and we were able to help him do that. We did that 3 years in a row with that individual. But it's great. We certainly learned a lot. It's a huge focus. It took a huge focus, to do that stuff. So, you end up sacrificing on product development, engineering, and new product development,
Right.
Our service department was consumed with, rebuilding race car, parts and broken race car parts and crashed race car parts. So we 2013, when we finally won, then we ended it and have since really not done too much of that type of racing. We now we have lots of Audis here with our parts on them, and we take them to
Right.
the track about 5, 6, 7 times a year. So we do a lot of track driving with our cars on track, but there's just not, like, I don't know what Unitronic's deal is with their car. I doubt they're making money on that program, but you could literally go out with your car on a Tuesday night and draggy a 10.9, break the world record, and have everyone in the world know that you have the fastest tune on the market,
Right.
with a $300 draggy, and 20 minutes of your spare time. So that's kind of, I think if you're smart with your money and resources, you focus on getting the results and those kind of opportunities.
I'd imagine it's probably it's a different set of success measures, right? Like if you're running in a series that has, events and televised coverage, et cetera, then it's an exposure and branding situation. And then if you're, like to me, that it seems like the drag racing scene is a bit more, people are hyper aware of it, but it's not like this televised packaged thing.
No, not at all. I'm literally talking about doing a draggy on your phone, and I'm talking about, bang for the buck. But yeah, if you want to build a brand over long term, that type of racing can help. I think certainly the exposure doesn't hurt. It's just, what do you pay for that?
Sure.
And what could you have spent? What kind of brand building activities could you have done for the probably over the years millions of dollars you'll spend on that? So for $300,000 a year of racing like that, you could hire 3 extra customer service people to make sure that everyone, and you could hire a couple extra shipping people to make sure that orders ship out the same day. So you could, and then that type of activity over time, the kind of brand that you want to build is they're excellent quality parts, they have great customer service, they ship fast on time. I know where I'm going to buy my parts from. And the fact that I see them racing a factory Audi on TV, it's like, well, so those are the kind of decisions I've had to make over the years, and I've certainly gone down all different paths.
It's funny, right? Like even for us at Audi Club, it's like just in a conversation with my team about this today, right? Which is like, when you have, it's, I suppose it's the problem of every small business. Like when you have a certain limited amount of resources and you have so much to spend on, and even on your own team, sometimes I know we've had differences of opinion of like, well, we should spend it on that, or, go this way or whatever. And like it's I'd love to do it all or get it launched immediately, but you have to pick it in a strategic way and hope you picked correctly, because like they obviously they all net different results. But
no, you can't do it all. Inherently, if you try to do it all, you end up with a lot less.
Right.
You actually create a result that's much worse by trying to do it all. So the kind of winning opportunity is, where do you do just enough of the right things,
right? Pick the mix,
and you eliminate just enough of the wrong things, or the lesser opportunity. Then you kind of hit that sweet spot. That's kind of, maximizing the compromises. That's where, typically the best result is. But sometimes you got to say no to things you don't want to say no to. Sometimes people might get their feelings hurt. You got to talk about that.
So So speaking of investment, you guys, do you have anything cool coming out that's worth, like, anything that's super hot right now that is worth mentioning, since we're,
as far as products and stuff?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we have we've been able to substantially grow our engineering team over the last few years, and so we just have a slew of new products coming out. A lot of this stuff is pretty esoteric and pointed into certain applications. So we have we've been working on this for a while, but we have a really cool fuel surge tank for the Daza cars. Specifically, these Dazzle cars have so much power, and the tank is designed as such that even with like 3/4 of a tank of fuel, you can still get fuel starvation on launching and
Really?
accelerating. So in order to address that issue, we've sort of taken the fuel tank performance out of the loop. And so we have a billet aluminum can that has a PWM fuel pump in it, a very high flowing one. And then so all we're using now is the stock fuel pump is to pump fuel into our little surge tank. The surge tank cannot starve because it's always 100% full of fuel. So you could throw 20 G's or 50 G's at that thing, and there's the fuel. There's no air inside it, so there's always fuel around the fuel pump pickup. Yeah, and so that's exciting. We're about to release that. It'll be like a full kit, full bolting kit with the wiring and the fuel lines and everything. We always have springs coming out. We have a whole line of parts coming out for the 4M Q7. So it's a lowering spring package, sway bars, some inserts, and 21-inch wheels. That the whole program is designed to work together. I daily drive a 4M Q7, so I'm particularly excited about this program.
That's a steel suspension car, or are you doing?
Yeah. This is we do have lowering links. So if the car has air, the sway bars and all the other parts will work. You would just use our lowering links to lower the car for like $150. That's definitely the way to go. And it just makes that Q7 just drive and handle even more like a car. They're actually really good stock, but my car has 3 15-inch tires all the way around. So it just has a ridiculous amount of grip. It's really fun. And then we have we'll release kind of like a 550 horsepower tuning package for that as well, which will just augment the supercharger system, run more boost.
We had one for a while. It was such a great product, but it was, so I had it earlier in pre facelift, right? So like those early, and it was an air suspension car, and I think if there was I had one complaint about it, it was that, right? Like it was my wife's car, so I wasn't driving all the time. She didn't really care, but like suspension was I think they fixed a lot, especially like SQ7 I hear is fantastic. But
I'm sure.
But that's great that you're, because
the sprung car with our springs and sway bars, I mean, it's just it probably handles or feels better than like a stock S4, like it's just really well set up once it gets the modifications. And you can still load it up with 7 people, you can still fill the trunk.
It's like a big Avant.
And it still has road clearance, you can still take it to the snow.
Does it?
It's not slammed or anything, but the thing has like 6-inch fender gap, and so we reduce it by 3 inches or 1.5 inches or something like that. Or it's like 40 to 45 millimeters, so almost 2 inches. But it's still 100% daily drivable.
Right.
And then I don't know if you've been following any of the stuff we've been doing with the B9 3.0T S4. We just had our in-house SQ5 run at 10.95 in the quarter mile, 0 to 60, 3.1 seconds, 0 to 60 in an SQ5. It is a full weight street car, no lightning or modifications at all. So
that's fantastic.
So you can pretty much make a daily driver reliable, 700 horsepower. The only caveat is you have to run an ethanol E85 blend. So you have to run like E60 or something like that. But you can also run full E85, and the power goes down a little bit. But really exciting time to be, if you enjoy tuning cars. The Audi line is just unbelievable. There's never been a time like this. Not in the last 20 years. Well, ever. But definitely not even close in the last 20 years. I mean, like the kind of 27T era of tuning, which was frankly pretty horrible, unreliable, expensive. This is a different era where you literally take a stock car for about $6,000 or $7,000 in parts. you can take it from 350 to 700 plus horsepower. It's and have it reliable and all
Really?
bolt on, no permanent modifications. And if you're willing to sacrifice a little power, you can keep the factory Cali converter, and it can be basically emissions legal as well.
Right.
You would pass any tailpipe test.
And that 3-liter is in so many vehicles now.
It's in everything now.
Yeah.
It's even in the 4M and a half Q7 has that.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's a great motor. It's incredibly. We're doing all this on the stock motor too, stock
really?
rods and everything. No internal modifications. So it's really, and the engine management
Robust.
systems just keep getting better and better too. So the control you have over the engine, helps with the reliability, because you can really control the power, and then you can make power everywhere because it's variable valve timing, variable cam timing. It's not like the old days where if you put a big turbo, it's all of a sudden really laggy.
Right.
You can completely reprogram the motor's volumetric efficiency and still have that power everywhere kind of performance. So yeah, it's really cool. Really cool what you can do these days. And again, the reliability is the key.
Yeah.
We're not here to blow up anyone's motor, or even have anyone get stranded or anything like that. That's no fun.
Right. Yeah, but the cool thing too is just like, I think that's what I've always loved about even from the 1.8T era on, was like how eye-opening, I think the first ride I got in a 1.8T B5, right, that had been tuned. It was down at the time it was like VW Sport, right, like 1552 early days in DC, and they had a tune on a B5, and it was like, I'm a VR6 guy, and you get in that and you're like, this is supposed to be the entry level whatever, right? And like, it makes such a monster out of and like you said, here we are at this. It's never been better as far as the potential in while you can do that with an RS3, one expects that when you see all of these cars setting records, etc. But then you look at like more of an everyday approachable vehicle, like anything from like an A4 to even a Q7, and being able to do that and still live your daily life, taking
you could literally be driving around in a 700 horsepower Q5 if you wanted to be,
which it sounds like Nick is doing.
Yeah I mean, not even an SQ5, just a Q5, talking about a sleeper, and then you could roll up on just about any muscle car, supercar, hypercar, anybody. So yeah, it's cool. And then again, the fact that it's just so reliable, anyone could drive these cars,
right?
Anyone with a driver's license.
Right. Do you worry about that at all? Like, not to turn this back around, because we're coming up on 2 hours anyway, but like, and I don't want to take too much of your day, but like that back when we were talking about electrics, right? And the whole parlor trick thing of like immediate power and insane levels of power is like, when you get to the point where, like, would you say, like, I think maybe 10% or 20% of the cars now in California that you're seeing are like electrics, right? Or Teslas, whatever. Like when you have that many people in cars that are that capable, and we'll throw in those 3.0T cars that you're talking about too, right? But like when you have that, like, one of the things I like about driving around in traffic is that, like, usually my car can, can get around, make the pass faster than most of the other people on the road. But I wonder how that goes, or how much we start to hate each other when like everybody's in a car that can kind of put down that kind of ridiculous.
We're definitely in the horsepower wars era. I mean, this is ultimately the manufacturers, are enabling all this by producing really good performing engines.
The arms race.
Just insane power and torque producing motors that they have to tune and dump way down.
Right.
But yeah, no, that's there. You imagine, I don't know what a Toyota Camry makes these days, probably like almost 400 horsepower.
Probably.
But imagine taking a Toyota Camry back in time,
Right.
You could beat up on everything, from any other era. So yeah, it's an interesting time. I do wonder how much is too much, and then at some point, like at some point, are there speed limiters in cars? It actually kind of astonishes me that the government lets us drive around in 1,000 horsepower cars.
When I was a kid, I always wondered, because I live here in Pennsylvania, right? One of the first toll road turnpikes in the United States is here in Pennsylvania, right? It's historic.
Yeah.
And I always wondered, like my parents were my grandparents rather were in Pittsburgh, and I would go out to visit them. And I always wondered, like, why have they not figured out that if they just timed the time I enter through the toll booth in Eastern Pennsylvania and like the time I exit, like even if I stop for the bathroom, the speeds I was going, especially when I was younger, there was no possible way to do it. You know what I mean? Unless you were.
I guess it proves we do have a certain amount of freedom here. There's no question.
I suppose. Yeah. I hope we don't lose that. But
no, I know. But it wouldn't surprise me if at some point it's like, hey, I mean, certainly with autonomous driving, that will happen at some point.
Yeah.
Although hopefully the speeds can be a lot higher.
Yeah, and they can run cars closer, right? Like if the cars are communicating, that you can get in a train and that should lessen traffic.
Yeah, everyone's going 100 miles an hour.
Right.
Yeah.
The other thing I noticed with our e-tron is like speaking of pissing people off or going fast, right? Like, but I've noticed with in traffic when, like, if I'm in my when we first bought the e-tron, I had an S5, right? And if I would take my kids to school in one of those two cars, and you go down this highway to get to school, and if there was like, I'm trying to get around somebody on the right, because they're blocking the passing lane, and if you get on the gas in the S5, even with a like stock exhaust, you're phoning into them that you're about to do something, right? Sure. Like you're signaling, I'm about to piss you off, and they close the door on you, right? Like if there's not that much room, you might have enough speed to get through, but even then they're angry. And I noticed with the e-tron that like you can snipe it, and not only are you not phoning it in, it doesn't really break their trance, right? Like they don't really seem like, even though you just did the exact same maneuver that you would have done in the S5, like you've not woken them up and alerted them to that. So they're just like passive about the entire experience. So like there's something about exhaust note, as much as I love the sound of it. It's
like a Jedi mind trick.
Totally, yeah. And as much as I love the sound of a great sounding engine, like I almost like the stealth of the e-tron, because I
could see that.
It's more efficient to get through traffic.
I could totally see that. No, I drive a lot of fast, loud, annoying cars, and it definitely pisses people off. No question about it.
Yeah, it triggers something primal, right? Like it's a competitive thing or whatever.
Yeah, people get real road ragey pretty easily these days. Yeah, it's like, I don't know, you could just keep sitting there in your trance doing the speed you were doing, and I'm just gonna go around you, but now you heard me, and
dude,
and now you're speeding up.
the Jedi mind trick thing. So that I actually have a term for that too. But like I was reading a column that Jack Baruth wrote, I think for Road and Track or Haggerty or something a year or two ago. But like but it was similar deal. I noticed when I was young, like if you know how somebody's in that trance in the left lane, and you're sitting behind them, and you're like, come on, right, whatever. And I've noticed, like, if you kind of roll up, not in a racy way, but you roll up next to them, and then like, because they're kind of like matching somebody, right? So they're blocking traffic. If you pull up into their field of vision and then back it off slowly, they will match you, because they seem to be like in a trance and just sort of like they're kind of like zoning on that car. And if they zone on you, you can kind of back them off and then full throttle and in, right?
Yeah.
But like,
you're totally describing. In California, we have I-5 that goes up and down the state. But if you're going from LA to Southern California to the Bay Area, you're on I-5, and it's 2 lanes. Speed limit's 70.
Right.
But inevitably, there's a semi and just someone in a Toyota Camry or Prius just sitting there doing the same speed as the semi, and then you have this line of cars. Sometimes 20, 30 cars. And so I'm always the guy that just goes in the right lane. I accelerate down to the end, and I just get kind of up next to the car, and then the whole line starts moving forward, because apparently they needed to be reminded that there's other people on the road or something. I don't know what the deal is.
My wife will get, so usually we have like this long trip to Maine every summer, right? And especially Massachusetts. Something about Massachusetts, people sit in that left lane, like on the Mass Pike, you just go in that third right lane and you can pass everybody.
Yeah.
But like, I will do that too, where like I'm, a couple cars back. There's no way I'm going to get around this guy. But if I can't even get in his field of view, I'll at least try and obnoxiously like run up and like break the trance. And my wife will be like, you were never going to make it. Like, I know, I was just there to wake them up. Like everybody thinks I'm the asshole now, but like,
I was just waking them up. George,
Yeah.
you're a huge asshole. So am
Well,
I.
I mean,
We're-
aside,
we're-
that's a whole
we're-
nothing to do with the traffic
we're-
situation, but focus.
we're the assholes that are applying
Yeah.
pressure. You know,
Well, but
somebody needs some pressure applied to their life. You know,
it's
just for a
it's just a chance, right? It's how do you
Yeah.
manipulate the chance? If I wake them up, then they'll make the pass. But like if I subtly roll into their field of view and kind of back them off, that's the Jedi mind trick. Then you're like
Yeah.
right in, right? And I think
I just like to think of it as we're reminding them that there are other people on Earth that also
Yes.
exist
Yeah.
and have needs and would
Really?
like to get home or go wherever they're going.
that's such a weird thing that
They're not
others
the
on the road
only
would be
one.
myopic
Yeah.
and selfish.
Yeah, they're not the only ones, and it's actually very dangerous to sit next to a semi as well. Like I would
Yeah.
never want to be doing 70s next to a semi whose tire could blow out and come careening right into me, at any given minute. So
do you have you ever driven like a pickup truck with like a bunch of crap in the back? Like have you like
that sounds like a nightmare to me. I do not like anything in the car sliding around.
No,
or moving
I know,
at
right?
all.
All right, so I live in central Pennsylvania, and around here we do that kind of stuff, right? And so like I have an old pickup truck that we primarily use for like when we're clearing stuff around our property or whatever else. I'll take it to the dump, right? Like so I'm literally going 3 miles, so I'll like tie it down and whatever, but you still have branches and whatever. And it always amazes me when I take that thing or like occasionally move furniture, like you see a truck under load of something, and more often than not when I see trucks like that, it's not tied down, right? Like they're just going across town to the dump. But like people will ride right behind you, like right on you. And I will literally pull over and just let traffic by because like they don't get, like if I'm in my car and I'm behind a guy like that, I'm like 3-4 car lengths back. Like I'm not going to get hit by any of his stuff.
I don't want to certainly tailgate someone like that.
Right. It's like people don't even do the math, right? Like they're not even, I'm sure they care to some degree. They don't want to be dangerous, but at the same time, they're like, yeah, whatever. They just see a vehicle in front of them and they're not even thinking twice about what it means for them.
I think this all just means that there's just a lot of people zoning out on the road, not thinking or aware of what they're doing.
So is autonomy good or bad? Because I think those
100% good. Bring it on.
I agree. Those people go to autonomy immediately.
I want autonomy. Okay, like when I do my 30-minute commute to work, I would rather be on Instagram or Facebook or reading the news. There's a million things I'd rather be doing than just mindlessly driving.
Do you have the start, stop, and lane assist on your Q7?
That one does not. Some of the other cars we have here does have that. Some people really love it. I'm not crazy about it, just because I don't always use the blinker, and I should, but God forbid, there's nobody around and I just want to move over a lane. I'm fighting with the steering wheel. I've learned to just use the blinker, or you just turn off traction control. But I'm not crazy about those things. They're not quite there yet, but
they got. But the first one that I really drove at any distance was like a generation ago S8, right? Like that's where Audi was starting to do it. But that would have, if somebody would drop into your field of vision, like I was going through Ohio in like a press car, and somebody drop in and the car really brakes, right?
Oh yeah, it slows way down. You can set the aggressiveness, but still.
But then I got into an early 4M, like my wife's she had a Prestige Q7, and like that was the first one that was like somebody would drop in, the car could kind of contend with it, right? Like it was more human in the way it would slow down, and like even the latest generation, like our e-tron is really quite good at it. And I find, especially like you get like around here, I don't really use it, but I get on the highway, or like we make that run to Maine, or I go down to DC and I'm in traffic, and like it's such a godsend, because like it's amazing on a long drive like that how much it less fatiguing the drive is, because like I can have a conversation and it kind of mainly does its thing. Now, like I did get into a situation in Philadelphia where like on the Schuylkill Expressway, which was notoriously bad, but like somebody was like dead stopping in front of me, and the car, like at that point the car was like, in the heads up display, like, oh, you're gonna get in an accident. You better take over right now, right? And I jammed the brakes and we were fine. But like I don't know, I find it's really I'm not anti, like a lot of people are anti that because they're a driving enthusiast. Like I'm a driving enthusiast, the road's nice, but if you put me in traffic, I'm fine handing over the
and I don't think there's a scenario where all roads are autonomous anytime soon,
right?
I think it will start on major freeways and things like that, and then you're going to get off the freeway and you're going to have to take control of the car to get home. And if you want to go into a canyon or a windy road somewhere, you sling and don't do that. And of course, then there's track driving, which I think will always be around as well.
Yeah.
I really like the what is it called? Auto sense, the braking thing.
Yeah.
Is that what it's called? That's
pre-sense.
Pre-sense. I'd like that in every car I drive, because there are times where I can be distracted if I happen to look down because my phone's buzzing or something.
Yeah.
The auto sense has helped or saved me in some cases.
Yeah, I think you find people against that too, but like I'm fine with it. There are a couple times that I will unintentionally trick it, and it will, it'll panic brake me.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like you're waiting to take the only time it really does it to me, and I can know that the exact two intersections that I use a lot doing it, but like if I will come off brake as cars are coming past me because I'm about to juice through traffic, and it's still sensing that car going past me. Like I've timed it early enough that like I'm not going anywhere. I'm off throttle, right? But like my foot of the brake, my brake is off because I'm about to juice through, and like it still senses that car, and it senses me coming off brake, and it's like, the car starts rolling, and then it's like, boop, everything starts lighting up, and it jams, and everybody in the car is like, what the hell?
It's kind of scary when it does it. I'll get bit every once in a while if I'm dive bombing a red light or a stoplight, and there's cars that are still stopped, but I can go right pretty fast. Yeah. And so as I come up on those, I'm going past the stop cars, but for a moment it thinks that those cars are going to be in front of me, and then it will trigger there.
I haven't had it do that on me.
Yeah, but no, overall I really like that feature. And yeah, no, I'd love to be in autonomous traffic. That sounds great to me. I think it's much safer too.
Yeah, it saved my bacon like enough times where like I'll deal with like a couple times it reads me wrong. Like that, I'm fine with that. Yeah. But like that time on the Schuylkill Expressway, like I was in RR6, and like, I'm talking about we were coming home for my kid's birthday. Like we were in the city for 2 nights with my kid, and she's in the back like arguing with her friend, and that's very distracting, and my wife's trying to talk to me, and so like I had autonomous on. And then, this panic stop thing happens, and like I would have wrecked the car had it not just kind of gone it was I'm going to assume then in autonomous, there's only so much braking it'll do before it's like, you need to be in control of this right now. Right. But it was all about it scared the hell out of my wife too. And she's like, why aren't you like, whatever, were you not in the car to hear them arguing with each other? Right. Like,
well, that's the compromise, right? Is you have to be 100% focused on the road, and right. Just like yelling at your daughter to stop arguing because it's distracting.
Yeah. So, but that's real world too, right? And I think that's where those systems are invaluable to me, because I can have those conversations and it still saves me. And I don't know.
Well, we could talk another hour about autonomous driving, and like if the autonomous system knows inevitably there's going to be an accident, how does it choose what happens to who and what?
Yeah,
really interesting ethical dilemmas around that too.
No, right, and on top of that, the insurance thing, right? Because you hear
then the liability associated with that.
Yeah,
so now you're contending with a situation where the system determined who was going to die. So did it commit murder?
Wow. Yeah.
So it gets kind of interesting, and I think that's going to be the liability is going to be some of the big challenges for autonomous driving.
Yeah.
Who's going to want to program that? Who's going to want to enact that code?
Well, I almost think I've heard I'm trying to think who I've heard talk about it. Maybe Matt Farah, like podcast stuff. Like I know he's very outspoken.
Yeah, he's great. I like him. Yeah.
Yeah, and outspoken about Elon and Tesla and whatever. I know he's cut some flack for that, but I think his critiques are fair. But where I'm going with that is until I think he's talked about if full autonomous, the liability then shifts to the manufacturer, right? The person who, or the entity that provided the programming and the hardware to do that, and how that works then with the mechanism of car insurance, right? Like if I'm driving, the liability is on me or the insurance covering me, but if the Audi is driving or the Tesla is driving or whatever, like
I think inevitably there's going to have to be some laws and legislation written to protect various parties from there's in some of these there's going to be no winning. So there is going to have to be some type of shield for some of the stuff that happens. And we see this in other parts of society too. Yeah, it's interesting stuff.
AI is a whole It's like a whole other thing.
And then there's AI. Well, then
Yeah.
beyond driving, that's just kind of scary too. So
Totally.
great and scary.
Well, like you said, I'll do a callback then, right? Like what you said earlier in the some other young whippersnapper can figure that out. At that point, I'm gonna be retired, and my autonomous car can
it's-
drive me around.
It's
'cause I'm
inevitable,
too old to
right?
drive. Yeah,
It's definitely it's here. It's not going anywhere.
yeah. Thank you for giving me the time today, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
I know we
likewise.
covered a lot of ground,
I
but
always enjoy talking to you. It's always
yeah,
very interesting, and I always learn something.
me too. Same here. So thanks, and I guess we'll trying to think when I'll see you next, but we need to get back out to the West Coast.
Yeah, or we can do this every once in a while too. I enjoy it.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Cool. All right.
All
Cheers.
right, man. Take care.
Thanks, George. All right, later.